Welcome to the audio fiction podcast, The History Singer, written, produced, and voiced by me, your host, Jan Nichols. You should know that the story is told in sequential order, so start with 101 and carry on. Also, The History Singer is written in changing first-person narrative. From time to time, you'll hear me say a character's name. That's your cue that the following section is from that person's perspective. And now, our story continues. Sebastian Sildur, Archon of the Learned Council. I stared at the skull on my desk. Freshly boiled, it still had a faint, meaty scent in spite of the chemical wash. Most visitors to my office ignored the bony collection that adorned my desk, or pretended to do so. Instead, they stared at the wall of glass with its view of the Learned Council gardens. It was a fitting backdrop for the sweeping half-circle of speckled granite that was my desk. Like the skulls, everything in my office was meant to evoke an uncomfortable emotional response, to blunt the will of those with a mind of their own, and to shorten the visits of those who had come to waste my time. My face mimicked the appearance of intent listening. The speaker was Baldric Lindendell, youngest son of a wealthy holding, recently elevated from acolyte to brethren status in the Skaldit Baine. He bored me. I occupied my mind by imagining my hands around his neck, squeezing until his life force flickered and slowly went out. I dropped the fantasy when the image created an unseemly response in my lower region. "You can understand my concern about Bacanyi," Baldric said. His voice was uncommonly high for a man of his heft and girth. The reedy tenor made it easy to be dismissive of his words, but even Baldric, blunt instrument that he was, occasionally stumbled upon something like wisdom. Yes, I said, the picture of patient understanding. "I am aware of your distrust of Bacanyi, but he is as a son to me, and I will not abide any harm to him. No harm until I know where his loyalty lies." "But Archon Sildur," Baldric insisted, "Bacanyi bears the Trinity mark. He is not sworn to you and our great cause." "Ah, so it is, Baldric," I said, adjusting my black robe in the heavy chain of office that circled my neck. "But neither has he sworn himself to any other. And until he does, we will be patient." I rested my palm on the skull and asked quietly, "Do you understand?" Baldric's Adam's apple bobbed convulsively before he affirmed, Yes, Archon, patience would be the wise course of action." Pressing my thumb on the recognition pad built into my desk, I pulled a leather pouch from a hidden drawer. It was filled with a mix of calm currency and golden coins for a clean bed and a meal at a small holding, and silicon wafers, highly prized in the kingdoms as energy packs for their digital devices. Baldric's eyes widened at the weight of the pouch as he caught it. He inclined his head downward and began to back toward the door. "Be careful of the currency," I said. "It's meant to take you places beyond Vrenholm. Contact me in the usual way. You know how very much I like to hear new things." My wife and infant son were in their chambers, countless floors below. Renatus was an iceberg of a city. Most of it existed below the surface. Iceberg, I thought, an apt metaphor for my life. I did not agree with the rabid anti-tek doctrine that the rank-and-file members of the Skaldit Baine embraced, but their blind belief that tech had killed billions of people was, like Baldric, useful. I am a pragmatist, a necessary trait for a man of vision. I could feel my heart pounding against the wall of my chest. My control of the Skaldit Baine was almost complete. As their leader, I would recapture all that was lost in the long-ago time. Then I would use the virus and my undying warriors to defeat the enigmatic Merdai, who betrayed humanity in its time of dire need. Returning to my desk, I picked up the skull and peered into its empty eye sockets. "What is a man?" I asked of the empty room. "We are such stuff as stars are made of." Ariante Grace, Eliphus and the man, Bacanyi, stared unblinking at one another for what seemed a very long time. Then Eliphus extended his arms, palm up, and Bacanyi did the same. It was a greeting of civility. The open hand signaled an invitation to be in company together without weapons. But I had never been told of what came next. They grasped one another by the forearms. Arms and eyes locked on one another until Eliphus quirked an eyebrow and pulled away. Was that a greeting, I wondered, or were they grappling? "You have grown up, Bacanyi," Eliphus said, "and you have a vise-like grip," as he rubbed one arm and then the other. "Meister Grace," Bacanyi's voice grated hard and cold on my ears, "I give you good greeting," he said after an uncomfortably long pause. "Ah, Xander and Bacanyi." Eliphus exhaled the name, getting the weight and shape of it on the back of his tongue. I could barely hear the next bit, a harsh whisper and a sigh of relief. "I promised that I would get you back," Eliphus said. His light blue eyes were a stormy marine. "And here you are." Abruptly, Eliphus was all brisk and business. "I am in your debt, Bacanyi," he said. "You protected Ariante, and I will never forget it." Eliphus held the back of his right wrist to his forehead, then placed his palm on his heart. It was an oath-swearing gesture. "Whatever is in my power to give, you have only to ask." The man Bacanyi barely bowed his head in acknowledgement of the oath. "Ariante," Eliphus said, "you have not been formally introduced. The man who came to your aid is Xanderin Bacanyi, scholar, Trinity warrior, and envoy from the great city kingdom of Renatus." I gave a slight inclination of my head, pretending dignity when neither my dress nor bandaged head allowed for any. Soba came up the wagon steps laden with a tray of cups, coffee, tea, and a round of poor man's cake, so called because it was made with only one egg. Her hazel eyes locked on Bacanyi, and he returned her gaze for such a long time that I squirmed at the awkwardness of it. Observing the rules of courtesy, Bacanyi remained silent until Soba performed first greeting. "I give you good greeting, Ser Bacanyi," Soba said, using the honorific reserved for people of noble blood or those with an abundance of accomplishment. Setting the tray down on the bunk across from mine, she indicated with a sweep of her hand that the men should sit. She fussed with cups and saucers, a delicate bone china I had never seen before. After slicing the poor man's loaf, Soba indicated that the men should serve themselves, while she placed tea and cake on a fold-up table next to me. The silence of 4 people in such a small space was oddly congenial, so of course I blurted out an inane comment. "I feel better." And I did. The warmth of the tea was comforting, and I realized that I was ravenous. Soba sat at the foot of my bunk, patting my leg as she silently mouthed the words of thanksgiving spoken by her kin. "Praise be to the blessed braid that binds you to this life, dear child." Then she looked directly at Ser Bacanyi. "Thank you, Ser Bacanyi, for your aid to my daughter. I did not have the opportunity to thank you properly when you brought Ariante and Toby back to us." For reasons I didn't understand, Bacanyi's neck flushed red. I watched color crawl up to his cheeks. "I am pleased that my limited skills were of service," he said. "The healing pharma of the grasslands is legendary." After a long pause, he looked up at Soba from beneath his black lashes. "I would welcome the opportunity to learn more," he said. Soba glanced at Eliphus before replying. "We shall see." "Will you be traveling with us?" she asked. Now it was Bacanyi's turn to give Eliphus a clear-eyed stare. "We shall see," he said. He stood abruptly and returned his cup to the tray in a fluid movement I couldn't help but admire. "I must tend to Xanthes," he said. Pausing a moment, he made a formal bow to Soba. "Thank you for the hospitality of your camp." Eliphus crossed the short distance to kneel by my bunk. I had never noticed before, but Eliphus moved with the same ease and elegance as Bacanyi had. Interesting, but my muzzy mind couldn't pursue the thought. "Rest," Eliphus said, cupping my hand to his cheek without disturbing the tray on my bunk. "And eat. You must regain your strength before we can continue your lessons." He kissed my hand and turned to go. "Soba," he called from the doorway, "is there any more coffee?" That man and his foul-tasting brew. Soba shook her head as she served me another slice of cake and collected the dishes. It wasn't meant for my ears, but I heard her grumble as she walked away. "It smells like skunk." Toby Grace. I lunged to stab Bacanyi in the stomach, then stepped to the outside of his counter-thrust, turning my body flat. Before I could bring my knife to his neck, Bacanyi moved beyond my reach. Then, with inhuman speed, he stepped in to block my knife strike with crossed arms that slid down to capture my right wrist, nearly twisting it off as he ran me into the ground. My wrist hurt, and I had a good taste of the dirt before he let me up. We had trained together for the last 10 days. I was sore in joints and muscles I didn't know I had. Bacanyi was a stern teacher, but fair, and at times almost kind. At least as kind as a grim-faced killer could be. I didn't know anything about him, but I knew he had killed before. As I caught my breath, I watched him train on his own. Bacanyi had built a straw man from dried river reeds and spent hours each day on different strikes, each one stopping a hair's breadth from the straw man on his tripod of saplings. He began slowly, methodically, breathing in and exhaling on the strike, head, side of the head, neck, body, knee, and wrist. His training made me think of Arianthe and the way she practiced singing. A single tone that rested on a silent breath would begin quietly, then swell to a controlled bellow. That's what I called it, just to tease Arianthe. It was like a great bell ringing until, at last, the note faded into silence. Then she would begin again, moving up the well-tempered scale a half tone at a time. I did not trust Bacanyi, but then I didn't trust most people, except for Arianthe. It was enough that he was teaching me to fight. I would learn everything, and I would never fail Arianthe again. Lotus of the Devrani. Luna and I made the clapping sound, smacking palms together as was done in this place, the known lands. As the elder by a quarter hour, I spoke first. "Well done, Sagir Toby," I said, using the endearment for little or young in the language of our tribe. Toby ducked his head, looking up beneath his eyelashes. He signed, "Do you speak truly, or are you mocking me as an earth-eater?" Pointing at Toby, Luna said, "You do not have the snout of an earth-eater, but it appears that you have the makings of a good warrior." You will need all of your newly acquired skills if you are to face Soba's wrath, I said. Oh, no, Toby signed. I have chores to do. You are fortunate to train with a trinity such as this one, Luna said, as Toby quickly gathered up his training weapons, bowed to Bacanyi, and ran into the lengthening shadows. To his credit, Bacanyi set aside his training blade and stood quietly with head bowed and eyes averted. He honors our ways, I thought, and he who shows respect shall receive it. My sister and I know your name. I will give you ours. In this land I am called Lotus, and my sister responds to the name Luna. We are Sahai, desert people, as are our kin, the Halmahara. They honor you with good words. For that reason, Lotus and I give you the name of our tribe. Then Lotus spoke the name of our people. We are Davrani, well meant, Xander and Bacanyi, trinity and kin of our kin. Well meant, Bacanyi said, Sahadanyi of Davrani, and adepts of the maiden dance. Ah, Luna exhaled slowly. How did you come to know the meaning of our marks? She asked. The Halmahara gave me a great honor, permitting me to watch a maiden dance during the season of 2 moons. I was told that only the adept wore the silver spiral upon their brow. He averted his gaze, then continued in a quiet voice. Both of you are so marked. Have you ever danced with a maiden, kinsman? I asked. Bacanyi looked up and beheld my gaze, saying, No, Sahadanyi Lotus, I have not. Men foolish enough to do so do not live to speak of it. What say you, Luna? Shall we invite our kinsman to dance? I asked. That would please me, sister, Luna said. What say you, Ser Bacanyi? Shall we dance? Bacanyi bowed at the waist, as is the custom in this land. I am honored, and I accept your invitation to dance. He used a fallen fir branch to sweep the ground, and then drew 2 parallel lines. Luna and I stood behind one, and Bacanyi behind the other. Well versed in the ways of the Halmahara, he had chosen a double-edged, steel-forged blade with a blood gutter, an unadorned crossbar, and a simple leather-wrapped hilt. With great precision, he set a short sword of similar design next to it. Lotus and I placed our jambya, short, curved daggers, next to our long swords, versatile weapons capable of deadly thrusts, cuts, and slices. After a moment of silence, the dance began. The greatest challenge for an opponent was not that one dancer faced 2, it was that one faced 2 who moved as one. Most of the men we had fought charged across the line as a bull in rut. Bacanyi was different. He was nonchalant, alert but unhurried. He entered into our sword thrusts a hair's breadth to the side, then controlled our blades down and around in a circular motion that pushed us backward. When Lotus somersaulted, then slid between his legs, her jambya extended to strike his tender maleness, Bacanyi rolled backward and stood ready to block my shoulder strike. We were entangled in everywhereness with Bacanyi. The 3 of us moved in sweeping circles, hanging in the air, moments longer than gravity allowed. Our weapons sang as we danced faster, then faster again, with the fierce delight of predators seeking prey. Suddenly, as of one accord, we stood still, still as the great stone monuments that looked upon our tribal lands. Lotus and I approached Bacanyi with our empty palms extended. Together we each placed a hand over Bacanyi's and held it to our maiden spirals. He said nothing, but his pupils were wide and shining. Then Lotus, changeable as the moon, laughed, saying, Kinsman, we 3 shall eat from the same dish tonight. I will place the tastiest morsels in your section of the platter in honor of your first maiden dance. Bacanyi gathered his weapons and followed us back to the camp. I looked back at him. Did you speak, kinsman? Pardon, Sahadanyi Lotus, Bacanyi said. I was giving thanks that my flesh will not be served as one of the tasty morsels at dinner. Luna and I laughed aloud without covering our mouths. It was a bad habit we had acquired in our travels across the known lands. We fell back to flank Bacanyi on either side. The Devrani have a saying, I said. It goes something like this in calm. To dine alone is to starve the soul. To dine in company is to starve the stomach. We will not starve this night, for there is to be a feast, I said, looking at Bacanyi, and your flesh will not be on the menu. Ariante Grace. A fortnight had passed since I had sung for a dead man. I was up and about, though my vision still went fuzzy if I turned my head too fast, and my mind was slow, as if it had lost interest in thinking. But I needed to practice and prepare for my debut as a history singer. A secluded grove of evergreen, whose needles cushioned the ground, was the perfect place. I had just finished my breathing exercises when I heard Eliphus and Bacanyi talking. I knew it was wrong to eavesdrop, and just as I was going to announce my presence, I heard Bacanyi say, "But does the girl know of the truth of the ladies' players?" That was that. I had to listen. Rin, Eliphus used the shortened version of Xandarin with an ease of long habit. The troupe are family. It is true that I chose them for reasons beyond their musical abilities, but they believe, as do I, that Ariante could be the greatest history singer in this age. She might even be something more, Eliphus said. What is the something more? Bacanyi asked. Is the beauty of her voice not enough for you? Eliphus swore, an invocation to male private parts and animal waste. Then he did something I had experienced only once or twice in my life. Eliphus stomped the ground and spoke with the full force of his trained voice. On ancient Earth, this ability was known, at least in Niponisha culture, as Kotodama. Neither spell nor incantation, Kotodama used the voice to unleash the spirit of spoken words, a way of stunning opponents, even causing them to submit. I will not speak of this, not now, not even to you, Rin, Eliphus said as the ground shuddered in response. I heard Bacanyi stumble backward into the brush that blocked my view. Even I, who knew the power of Eliphus's voice, fell backward on my rump. Bacanyi snorted, sounding like his horse Xanthes. I couldn't hear the exact words, but Bacanyi spoke with a bitterness and cynicism that made my blood run cold. The girl doesn't know who you really are, as I do. Alas, Rin, you do not really know me at all. The withered grass crunched beneath his feet as Eliphus turned to leave. Bacanyi spoke with a quiet intensity that halted Eliphus in mid-step. What of the song? Bacanyi asked. How did I come to know the song she sang for the decomp? I could hear Eliphus heave a mighty sigh. I will tell you that tale, Rin, but not today. I stood up too soon, and a screen of black dots danced before my eyes. I managed not to faint, but I must have made some small sound, for in an instant Bacanyi was crashing through the scrub. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you did, I have a small ask. To make it easy for you or your friends to follow the show, just use this link. It goes like this: follow the podcast patreon.com/historysinger. That's it. Easy. Also, if you'd like to leave a rating and review to help others discover the show, I have an easy link for that too. Simply go to lovethepodcast.com/historysinger. You know, I thought I made this podcast for me because I felt compelled to tell this story. Now, I realize I really made it for you.